Exercise can crush visceral fat. First major takeaway, you don't need to lose weight to lose visceral fat. One randomized trial had people exercise on a stationary bike for 45 minutes twice a week. And after 2 months, even though they hadn't lost a significant amount of total weight, their subcutaneous fat, that's the fat right under the skin, was reduced by 18%, and their visceral fat, the fat inside and around the organs, was cut by 48%. Their visceral fat was cut in half, even though they didn't lose significant total weight. That's crazy. So how is that possible? They lost visceral fat, they lost subcutaneous fat, and yet their total body weight wasn't reduced. Doesn't seem to make any sense. One possibility is that they lost fat but gained a little bit of muscle, so the net effect is a wash. Another possibility is that the mass of fat that they lost is a small percentage of their total body weight. And so when you average across all of the participants, it doesn't reach statistical significance. So it's a small percentage of total body weight, but it's a significant percentage of fat, especially visceral fat. Either way, this is a great result. And it wasn't just smaller fat depots. Their blood work improved as well, indicating metabolic improvements. Their insulin sensitivity improved by 46%, probably a result of losing all that visceral fat. So we have to be careful obsessing over the number on the scale. Just because you did all that work in the gym and the number on the scale barely came down, it doesn't mean exercise isn't giving you crazy benefits. Also, this difference between the effect on the subcutaneous fat and the visceral fat is very striking. So subcutaneous fat is the fat you can pinch, the fat right under the skin. It's the fat that most people tend to focus on when you look in the mirror. We want to lose that for aesthetic purposes, to get shredded, right? To get those 12-pack abs. And that came down by 18%. Very respectable, especially for 2 months. But the visceral fat came down by 48%. It's more than twice the magnitude of decrease. So exercise seems to be targeting selectively, specifically, the visceral fat, which doesn't show in the mirror, but it shows in your blood work, and it has the bigger impact on your health, especially long term. Second major takeaway, when it comes to visceral fat, exercise is at least as powerful as diet. One big meta-analysis compared trials that cut calories to trials that used an exercise program, and they tried to match for calories. So the same number of calories being burned with the exercise as are being reduced with the diets, so that it's apples to apples. And they found that diet was better for total weight loss, but when it came to visceral fat, exercise tended to work better, although it didn't quite reach statistical significance. So it's a trend. So we can say, without hyping it excessively, that exercise was at least as good as cutting calories, if not better. Now, of course, we want to eat clean and we want to exercise. Ideally, we want to do both, right? If I eat like a pig, even if I run marathons, I'm not going to see massive effects on my visceral fat or my health in general. But yeah, holding diet constant, exercise has a big impact for visceral fat. And this is good to know because it didn't have to be this way. It actually surprised me. In fact, as this meta-analysis shows, and this is pretty widely accepted, for total body weight loss, diet is much more powerful than physical activity. Some people even question whether exercise per se has a meaningful impact for weight loss. Well, this is fascinating, right? Based on these results we just looked at, that whole debate whether exercise alone is very helpful for weight loss or not, it might entirely miss the point. Because if exercise doesn't reduce my total body weight, but it reduces my fat, and it reduces the fat that actually matters most metabolically and health-wise, yeah, I'll take that result any day. All right, third major takeaway. Okay, exercise is great for visceral fat, but what type of exercise is best specifically? Spoiler alert, it's not crunches. Sometimes we have this idea that to lose belly fat, we want to work the belly, so crunches, right? Well, it doesn't quite work like that. Crunches burn some calories like any form of exercise, and they work the muscles under the belly fat. So they're going to make those muscles more toned. So it might help visually, but it's not specifically going to help you lose the fat in your belly. But a number of studies have looked at different types of exercise specifically for visceral fat. And in general, cardio comes out on top. It seems a bit better than resistance training. So resistance training is going to the gym and lifting weights or body weight exercises, so challenging your muscles to the limit. Cardio, you know what cardio is. So swimming or running or biking or tennis. So cardio respiratory exercise that tends to leave you out of breath. So one meta-analysis of randomized trials found that cardio, biking 3 times a week, for example, significantly reduced visceral fat, whereas resistance training alone had no significant effect. I'm not saying not to lift weights. It's great for building a bit of muscle, for holding on to muscle as you lose weight. It's great for different aspects of health, but specifically to lose visceral fat, cardio seems to have the edge. In fact, going over these studies has motivated me to pay more attention to cardio, because sometimes I tend to focus on going to the gym and the cardio is a bit of an afterthought. But reading these things has kind of kicked my butt to make sure that in the days between the gym, I ride a bike or at least go for walks, do some form of cardio consistently. Okay, specifically, what type of cardio is best to lose visceral fat? One meta-analysis compared regular cardio, kind of traditional cardio like running or biking or swimming, to HIIT, high intensity interval training. Most people are familiar with HIIT, I think, in this day and age, but it's short bursts of intense exercise, like 30 seconds, for example, sprinting or jumping up and down or biking, and then resting, and doing that in cycles, going hard and resting, going hard and resting, on and on and on. And this meta-analysis found that they had a similar effect, the traditional cardio and the HIIT did, for total body fat percentage and also for visceral fat. Now, HIIT was a bit better than regular cardio for VO2 max, and fascinatingly, for fasting blood sugar and for total cholesterol, to bring down those two metrics, HIIT was a little better than regular cardio, but for visceral fat, it was pretty much a tie. So this is a great result. It's almost the ideal result because this gives you all the options in the world. If you like regular cardio, you can do that. If you like HIIT, you can do that. HIIT has an advantage, which is it's faster. The workouts tend to be faster, which for people who are short on time is a great option. So HIIT is like the drive-through of exercise. You get in and you get out quick and you get what you came for. And as I've said here before, the best exercise in the world is the exercise you'll actually do. Because if you hate running or if you hate swimming or if you hate HIIT, don't do that because you're not going to stick with it. But if tennis is more exciting or badminton or whatever it is, a form of cardio that you actually enjoy, go with that because it's going to become sustainable for you. I found another meta-analysis that tried to be even more specific. They asked within the HIIT modality, what type of HIIT is best? Because you can do HIIT by sprinting or biking or swimming and then resting. So they asked which of those varieties is best for visceral fat specifically. And they found that running HIIT seemed to be more effective than cycling HIIT, both for total and for visceral fat. Now, they speculate as to why this might be. They offer a couple of possibilities. It might have to do with the sympathetic nervous system, but the reality is nobody knows. Also, this is the only analysis where I've seen this result reported, looking at specific HIIT types and running HIIT having an edge. So I would take this result with a grain of salt until we see it reproduced. This meta-analysis, the same one, also looked at the intensity level of HIIT, and they defined it as a 90% peak heart rate being the cutoff between high intensity and low intensity. And they actually found that moderate intensity or low intensity, basically under 90% peak heart rate, seemed better for visceral fat loss than high intensity over 90. High intensity was better for total fat loss, but low intensity or moderate, under 90 basically, was better for abdominal fat and visceral fat. They suggest that this might be because people who do a lower intensity end up doing more of the exercise, end up doing longer duration, whereas the folks doing very high intensity tire out faster, and so the total volume is lower. Possible, but it doesn't explain why the result is inverted for total fat. Anyway, the result they find is this, which is actually good news as far as visceral fat, because it's saying you don't have to kill yourself going full throttle. Even a more moderate intensity, if 80% heart rate is considered moderate, can give you the same results or maybe even better. It's often the case that consistency beats intensity for many things in life, and it works here too. Okay, so we have that exercise is huge for visceral fat. We have that cardio in general seems a little bit better than resistance training, and HIIT seems just as good as regular cardio and faster. And within HIIT, running HIIT may be a little better than cycling HIIT. Now, how much exercise do you need to do on a weekly basis, for example, to reap those benefits? Some studies indicate what we call a dose dependence, meaning that the more you do, the longer the sessions, the higher the frequency, the more benefits you get, the faster that visceral fat comes off. But a solid program could be 2 or 3 times a week, 3 times being a bit better than twice if you can. Cardio, like a half-hour run or a half-hour bike ride or tennis or swimming. Or if you're short on time, it could be 2 or 3 weekly sessions of HIIT. And ideally, you want to have some resistance training sessions as well. Hit the gym and lift some weights at least twice a week in between those cardio sessions, so you can hold on to your muscle tissue as you're shedding all that fat. If you're not ready for full-blown cardio, if you've just started, if you're warming up, or if your health condition doesn't allow you to go on hard runs or bike rides, even just daily walks can help, or even just staying active around the house, chores, gardening, taking the stairs, walking a little farther. Every little bit can help keep that visceral fat to a minimum. And as you're working out to reduce that visceral fat, you want to keep track of where you are. One of my favorite sayings is, what gets measured gets done. So you can estimate the amount of visceral fat that you carry. There's a method where you can get a ballpark of your visceral fat depots, and it's free. It's easy. You can measure it at home. It doesn't cost anything. And we explained exactly how to do it in this video right here. So check it out, and I'll see you in there.